My brother stood at a family barbecue and said, "I'm basically running the whole show now," while I held a beer with sawdust still in my hair, after doing 14-hour days to keep our dad's shop alive. They say legacy is what you leave behind. But for me, it always felt more like something you had to drag behind you, whether you wanted to or not. My name is Darren. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Eugene, Oregon. For as long as I can remember, my life has revolved around sawdust, wood glue, and the rhythmic whir of table saws. My dad, Rick Coleman, ran Coleman Custom Woodworks for over 30 years, the kind of small-town business people actually trusted. He made everything from elegant dining tables to custom cabinetry, all by hand, with this quiet precision that people admired. But things started changing 2 winters ago, when Dad's breathing got worse. COPD, the doctor said. Progressively debilitating. He stopped doing hands-on work in the shop and started sitting more often in the corner office, wrapped in that old flannel blanket Mom crocheted back in the 80s. That's when my brother Brandon and I began stepping in. Brandon was always the showman. Big smile, easy charm, handshakes that made people feel like they mattered. He slid effortlessly into the role of client manager and marketing guy, the one who showed up in clean jeans and collared shirts, talking vision and design choices like he'd been doing it his whole life. In reality, he'd spent the past decade bouncing between careers, never really landing anywhere. Me? I stayed in the back. Quiet, focused, practical. I managed the orders, tracked our inventory, and made sure projects got done on time. I ran the shop floor, trained the apprentices, and handled the billing. I knew every square inch of that building, every creaky board and temperamental tool. At home, though, Brandon got the praise. "You should have seen how Brandon handled that client," Dad would say, his face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. Mom would nod, saying how proud she was of his initiative, how he brought new energy to the business. And me? I got the occasional, "Thanks for staying late again," or "Make sure we don't go over budget on that kitchen build." I told myself it didn't matter, that the work spoke for itself. But the more Brandon talked about streamlining our image and getting the brand out there, the more I noticed little things didn't line up. A job we supposedly booked through his contact would turn out to be someone I'd followed up with twice. Quotes he claimed to have negotiated would come back with numbers I knew I'd written. At first, I chalked it up to miscommunication. Then I started keeping track. He was rewriting our story, bit by bit, and no one seemed to notice but me. Brandon had a way of making people believe they were watching something bigger than what was really there. Clients, suppliers, even our mom, they all saw this confident, forward-thinking guy driving the business forward. But I was the one doing the driving. He was just riding shotgun with the windows down and the music turned up. Most mornings, I was in the shop by 7. Heat on, tools checked, orders laid out, hands deep in sawdust before most people even had coffee. Brandon usually strolled in around 10, iced coffee in hand, with some story about meeting a potential partner or someone huge on Instagram who might want a custom piece. He'd wander around, snapping photos of the guys working, posting quotes like "handcrafted excellence, family-owned, legacy-built." I'd be sweating through my flannel shirt while he was out front playing the visionary. At dinner, it was the same routine. Brandon holding court while Mom passed the mashed potatoes and beamed at his every word. "Met with a couple today who just moved in from Portland," he'd say. "They loved our story. Said we felt like the last of a dying breed." I'd pitch them that walnut and brass blend we've been playing with. They ate it up. I'd glance at Dad, hoping for some acknowledgement that I had been the one to sketch out that design, source the reclaimed walnut, test the joinery angles. But Dad would just nod slowly and say, "That's the kind of vision we need." And Mom? She'd sigh dreamily and say, "That's why Brandon's always been the creative one." I wanted to say something to remind them I was the one keeping the books balanced, coordinating the deliveries, making sure the guys in the back got paid on time. But every time I opened my mouth, it felt petty. Like I was the jealous sibling trying to one-up the golden boy. Brandon didn't help, either. He started dropping little comments, always with a smile. "I wouldn't survive without Darren here," he'd say. "He's the one keeping my wild ideas grounded." Or, "Darren's great with logistics." Not everyone wants to be client-facing. Client-facing. That became the buzzword. As if I was hiding from the world while he carried the burden of keeping our name alive. And every time Mom repeated it, "He's just so good with people, your brother," it felt like a pat on the head. Like I was the helper in my own story. But the moment that really got to me was at our uncle's barbecue. Someone asked how the business was going, and Brandon, with a laugh and that familiar shrug, said, "It's a lot of work, but worth it. I'm basically running the whole show now." I stood there, beer sweating in my hand, smile frozen on my face, as everyone nodded and said how proud they were. And Brandon? He never even looked at me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, realizing something I hadn't wanted to admit before. He wasn't just spinning the story. He was cutting me out of it. It was a Wednesday morning when everything fell apart. I got to the shop early, like always. The parking lot was empty, too empty, and the delivery bay, which usually had a couple guys unloading lumber or gear, was locked up tight. At first, I thought maybe Brandon had sent out a message about a late start I hadn't seen. But the second I walked through the side door, I knew something was wrong. The place was empty. No whirring machines. No smell of fresh cut wood or lacquer. Just silence. The kind that rings in your ears and makes your stomach twist. Workbenches were wiped clean. Toolboxes closed. Even the whiteboard with our project schedule had been erased. I walked through the space like I was in a dream or maybe a nightmare. My boots echoed on the concrete floor, every step heavier than the last. When I got to my little office in the back, I saw it. An envelope. Just sitting there, right in the middle of my desk. My name written in Brandon's handwriting. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter, neatly typed. Short and cold. Darren. As of April 1st, Coleman Custom Woodworks has been sold. The new owners take over operations this week. Please direct all questions to their legal team, contact attached. I know this comes as a surprise, but it was the right call. You've always been great with the technical stuff, but the business needed real change. This was the only way forward. Brandon. April 1st. 2 weeks ago. He sold the company 2 weeks ago. I sat down, still holding the letter, my heart pounding. I picked up my phone and called him. Straight to voicemail. Again. And again. By the 5th try, I was yelling into the phone, even though I knew he wouldn't hear it. What the hell did you do, Brandon? He finally answered with a text. I'll call you later. Can't talk now. It's already done. We'll talk soon. That's when the shot cracked open and the anger started spilling in. I spent that whole afternoon on the phone, first with the legal contact he listed, then with our accountant, then with the state business registry. Piece by piece, I started seeing what had really happened. He hadn't just sold the business. He'd negotiated everything under a shell company, one I'd never even heard of, and somehow left me completely off every document. No consent. No signature. No heads up. Nothing. Just a note on a desk and a ghosted phone number. That night, I sat in the empty shop, staring at the blank whiteboard where our work schedule used to be. Years of sweat, long nights, busted knuckles, erased with a signature I never saw. He sold our father's legacy out from under me. And the worst part? He didn't even have the guts to look me in the eye while he did it. I couldn't sleep for days after I found the letter. I kept going back over everything. The empty shop. The wiped whiteboard. Brandon's smug, half-assed message. None of it made sense, unless it wasn't just a sudden decision. Unless this had been in motion for a long time. So I started digging. First, I pulled up the company's digital records, what little I still had access to. The invoices and tax documents we'd shared in Google Drive. The QuickBooks backups I'd exported last quarter. Brandon had always let me handle the bookkeeping grunt work, probably assuming I didn't really pay attention. He was wrong. Within a few hours, I noticed something strange. A handful of payments made to an unfamiliar LLC, North Pine Solutions. The name wasn't on any vendor lists, and the descriptions were vague. Consulting fees, material sourcing, strategic services. Thousands of dollars over the last 3 years. At first, I thought maybe he was just funneling money to hire outside help without telling me. That would have been bad enough. But when I pulled the public records for North Pine, Brandon's name was right there. Registered agent. Founder. Listed at his home address. That son of a bitch had been stealing from us. For years. He'd set up his own company behind my back, build our business through fake services, and pocketed the money like it was nothing. Every time, I wondered why our margins were shrinking, why some vendor checks bounced, why Dad's medical bills had started stressing us out more than they should have. It was him. Every penny he siphoned off had come out of the business. Out of the work I did. Out of the legacy our dad built. I printed out every document. Every invoice. Every bank statement that showed those payments. I stacked them all in a manila folder like it was a murder case. Because honestly, it felt like one. That night, I sat in the apartment I'd barely been able to afford since the shop closed. I looked at our father's old photo, the one where he's standing in front of the first Coleman workbench, arms crossed and proud as hell. And I swore to myself, out loud, I'm not letting Brandon get away with this. The next morning, I called a lawyer. It took less than 15 minutes into the consultation before the attorney, a woman named Natalie from Corvallis, said, if this is true, and it looks like it is, we have a case for fraud and embezzlement. Possibly even grounds to challenge the sale. I nodded, gripping the folder in my lap. My stomach was churning, but my mind was clear. Brandon didn't just betray me. He stole from our family. And now, I was going to make sure he paid for it. I didn't want to go to my parents' house. But I had to. There were things they needed to hear, things they deserved to know. I couldn't keep carrying the truth around like some terrible secret while everyone else lived in the dark, thinking Brandon was still the golden son. I showed up just after dinner. Mom opened the door, her cardigan sleeves rolled up like she'd been washing dishes, her eyes lighting up for a second, then dimming just as fast. Oh, she said, stepping aside. You're here late. Yeah, I said. I need to talk to you, and Dad. It's important. She hesitated, then nodded. He's in the den. Dad was reclined in his chair with the TV on low, flipping through a magazine he wasn't really reading. When he saw me, he pushed himself upright. Hey, kid. What's going on? I didn't sit. I pulled out the folder and placed it on the coffee table between us. It's about the business, I said. About Brandon. Mom came in behind me and sat next to Dad, already bracing like she knew this wouldn't end well. I opened the folder and laid it out. Bank transfers. Fake invoices. Copies of the LLC filing for North Pine Solutions. He's been stealing, I said flatly. For years. He set up a fake company and funneled money out of Coleman Woodworks. That's how he sold the shop. He used funds from the business to buy it under his shell company and then flipped it to a corporate firm. They stared at the papers like they were written in another language. Dad squinted at the numbers. You're saying he took the money? Yes, I said. He didn't just sell the business behind my back. He bled it dry long before that. Mom picked up a page, then set it back down. That can't be right. It is. I've had a lawyer go over everything. It's real. Dad leaned forward, staring hard at the documents, his jaw tight. He said he was saving the business. He was saving himself, I said. And he used us to do it. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Mom said softly, he always meant well. He wouldn't, not intentionally. My chest tightened. He did. Intentionally. This wasn't an accident. He planned it. Dad's face was turning red now, veins showing along his temple. That little bastard. I trusted him. Finally. But then Mom put a hand on his arm and said, we should talk to him first. Hear his side. Maybe there's more to it. And just like that, I felt the bottom drop out. Even with the truth in front of them, she still wanted to believe in him. Still wanted to protect the image. I stood up slowly. I thought you should know, I said. But I'm not waiting for your permission. Dad looked at me and nodded. Just once. His eyes said more than his words did. Anger, disappointment, maybe even guilt. But Mom? She just looked tired. Conflicted. Still holding out hope that somehow this was all a misunderstanding. I walked out feeling more alone than I had when I walked in. But one thing was clear. If this was going to get fixed, it was going to be me who fixed it. The first real step forward came the following Monday morning. I sat across from Natalie, my lawyer, in a quiet conference room above her office. She had a highlighter in one hand, a legal pad covered in notes, and the calm focus of someone who'd seen far worse and knew exactly how to dismantle it. Your brother's mistake, she said, flipping through the folder, was thinking nobody was paying attention. I just nodded. I'd stopped trying to explain what it felt like, to work your whole life building something with your hands, only to have it gutted by someone with a grin and a fake invoice. Natalie outlined our options. We can pursue this two ways. Civil action for embezzlement and fraud, based on these financial documents. And we challenged the sale of the business on grounds of misrepresentation. If the corporate buyer wasn't made aware of these internal dealings, the sale could be voided, or at least stalled. Stalled is good, I said. Stalled gives us time. She nodded. And leverage. So we got to work. I spent hours helping her compile the evidence. Everything from payroll records to communication logs, proving that Brandon had systematically hidden payments and transferred funds into his shell company, all while posing as a trustworthy co-owner. I didn't sleep much that week. My apartment became a mess of receipts, binders, coffee cups, and sticky notes. I'd wake up with a stiff neck from falling asleep at my desk. But for the first time in weeks, I had purpose again. Natalie drafted an initial injunction and sent it to the buyer's legal team. A few days later, they responded, nervous, formal, and very interested in pausing all payouts related to the sale until things were clarified. Brandon's payday had just been frozen. That part made me smile. But it wasn't all victories. There were days where it all felt too big, too heavy. I'd drive past the shop, see the lights on under new ownership, and feel like someone had reached inside my chest and twisted. Dad wasn't getting better. Mom was still in her weird state of denial, sometimes calling to ask if I'd talked to Brandon yet. If we'd worked it out. And me? I was up to my ears in legal documents, fighting a battle I never asked for. But I wasn't backing down. One night, after a full day of meetings and paperwork, I sat in my truck outside the old shop. I stared at the building, remembering the way it used to smell, the clack of Dad's pencil against the drafting table, the laughter during break times. Brandon tried to take that from me. But now, I was taking it back. The news hit Brandon like a gut punch, and I got to watch it happen. It started with the buyer's response. After reviewing the documents my lawyer sent, they froze the sale proceeds in escrow. Every cent Brandon thought he was about to walk away with? Gone for now. Held up in legal limbo. Apparently, the buyer had no idea about the fake LLC or the embezzlement trail. Their legal team didn't want to be anywhere near a fraud suit, and they made it very clear, if even a shred of what we claimed held up in court, the deal was tainted. They weren't going to risk finalizing the transfer until things were resolved. That meant Brandon was broke and furious. I found out from Kelly, his wife, first. She texted me one evening. He's unraveling. Won't stop pacing. Keeps saying, they're trying to ruin me. I didn't respond right away. But I won't lie, it felt good. After everything he'd done, watching his perfect image crack felt like justice finally waking up. Then came the confrontation. It wasn't planned. I pulled into my dad's driveway one night to drop off some paperwork he needed for his medical coverage, and there was Brandon's truck parked crooked, doors still open. I heard raised voices through the front window. I stepped inside and saw him, pacing the living room, red-faced, shirt untucked, yelling at Mom and Dad like it was their fault. They froze the goddamn money. Darren did this. He's trying to destroy me. Mom sat on the edge of the couch, silent and shell-shocked. Dad just looked exhausted. I didn't wait to be invited. You destroyed yourself, I said from the doorway. Brandon spun toward me, eyes wide. You smug bastard. You think you're so righteous? You're tearing this family apart. No, I said, stepping into the room. You did that the moment you forged Dad's signature on that sale contract. You sold off everything he built and lied about it. His face twisted. I saved us. You were too stuck in your little world to see it. You think grinding through orders in the back makes you a leader. I held up a folder. This is everything, Brandon. Emails. Financial records. A paper trail a mile long. I'm done being quiet. He looked down, just for a second. And for the first time, I saw it fear. Not the showman anymore. Just a cornered man watching his world collapse. You're not going to win, he muttered. You never had what it takes. I stepped closer. This isn't about winning. It's about Dad. About our family. And about finally telling the truth. He didn't respond. Just clenched his jaw and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled. Mom looked at me, eyes glassy. What happens now? I took a slow breath. Now? We finish this. Courtrooms always seem dramatic in movies, long speeches, slamming fists, big emotional moments. Real life? It was quieter, colder, but no less brutal. The day of the hearing, I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Natalie. Across the aisle, Brandon looked like a ghost of himself, pale, jaw tight, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit right. His hair wasn't slicked back like usual. His eyes darted toward me once, then away. He didn't look like a visionary anymore. The case wasn't flashy. We weren't there for fireworks. We were there to prove fraud, plain and simple. Natalie walked the court through the LLC, the fake invoices, the fund transfers, and the paper trail leading from our accounts to Brandon's side business. She didn't have to embellish. The documents spoke for themselves. Brandon's lawyer tried to spin it. Called the LLC a side consulting project. Said the payments were authorized by verbal agreements between the brothers. Claimed the sale was a strategic pivot to protect the business. But when the judge asked for written evidence of any shared decision-making, there was none. Then came the kicker, our father's testimony. He walked slowly to the stand, breathing shallow and raspy, but clear-headed. When asked whether he gave consent for Brandon to sell the business, he didn't hesitate. No, he said. That sale was done behind my back. I would never have agreed to it. That changed everything. By the end of the day, the judge delivered his ruling. The sale was voided. The court found sufficient evidence of fraudulent conduct. The buyer would be reimbursed from Brandon's escrowed funds. Brandon was ordered to repay the siphoned money to the business, every last dollar. He slumped in his chair like someone had knocked the wind out of him. I didn't cheer, didn't smile. I just sat there, letting it sink in. Afterward, outside the courthouse, Natalie clapped me on the shoulder. You did it, she said. I nodded. But the truth was, it didn't feel like a victory, not in the way people think. I had my family's business back, but it came with scars. Trust broken. Time lost. Brandon walked past me on the courthouse steps, avoiding my eyes. Alone. No reporters. No applause. Just a man stripped of every illusion he built. And me? I drove straight to the shop. Parked out front. Stared at the sign that still bore our name. Coleman Custom Woodworks. It wasn't over. There was a mess to clean up. A legacy to rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, it was mine again. The shop felt different after the court ruling. Same walls. Same old smell of cedar and oil. But something had shifted. Maybe it was the silence. No more waiting for the next betrayal. No more second-guessing what Brandon might be doing behind my back. Just me, the tools, and the work again. The first thing I did was strip the walls of anything tied to him. His plaques, his framed marketing photos, the promotional prints he ordered with our logo stamped like some fancy brand. Gone. I boxed it all up and left it at our parents' house. Didn't say a word. A week later, Mom called. She asked how things were going, if I needed anything. Her tone was gentle, careful, like she knew she was on thin ice. I kept it polite. Said things were fine. That I was rebuilding. She didn't bring up Brandon, and I didn't ask about him. We both knew the damage was done. Then Kelly reached out quietly, through a message. She said Brandon had moved in with an old college buddy after losing the house. The sale money was gone, of course. Most of it went back to the buyer or into court-ordered repayment. He'd burned through the rest before the freeze ever hit. He was working part-time at a car dealership now. She said he barely spoke, barely smiled. That he kept talking about how everyone had turned on him. How nobody understood. That part didn't surprise me. He still saw himself as the victim. What had surprised me was how little I cared. Not in a cruel way, just empty. The anger that used to wake me up at night had faded. All that was left was a quiet acceptance. Some people don't change, and it's not your job to fix them. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding. Got a small team together. A couple of the old guys came back, said they were happy to work under me, not the brothers. I brought back our old supply partners, reopened our books, and redesigned the website myself. Slowly, the orders started coming in again. And one night, as I stood in the shop by myself, brushing off a finished tabletop with sawdust clinging to my sleeves, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not in the work, though I loved the work, but in myself. For standing up. For fighting back. For finally stepping into the role I'd always avoided, the one in charge. Brandon's shadow was gone. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't behind the scenes anymore. I was the one building something that would last.